What's up, horror fans? Danny here from the Lasercast, and I'm super excited to talk about In Search of Darkness, 1990 to 1994. That's right, if you loved the In Search of Darkness trilogy that was put out by creator VC and director David Weiner, I have them here. I have In Search of Darkness 1, In Search of Darkness 2, In Search of Darkness Part 3. I even have In Search of Tomorrow, their 80s sci-fi documentary. All of these documentaries put out by creator VC are over 4 hours long and completely comprehensive of the 1980s and genre films. One of the great decades for genre filmmaking. We at the Lasercast have been backing these documentaries from the beginning. We have had David Weiner on our podcast, on our YouTube channel several times. He is a friend of the channel, and it's with pleasure that I'm talking to you about In Search of Darkness, 1990 to 1994. Super excited because when people talk about the great decades of horror, I always like to say that the 70s are for quality, the 80s are for quantity, and then the 90s kind of has this reputation for, well, that's when horror starts to dip off, and then there's this kind of mythos that Scream saved horror. I don't think horror really needed saving in the early 90s or in 1996 when Scream came out. Just to reel off a few movies, just between that 5-year span, 1990 to 1994, you have Misery, which features a Best Actress Oscar-winning performance from Kathy Bates. You have Tremors, Bram Stoker's Dracula, The People Under the Stairs, Candyman, In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, The Exorcist Part 3, and a little movie that swept the Academy Awards, Silence of the Lambs. And sure, I know some people will say, well, it's a psychological thriller. Yeah, it's a horror movie. Hannibal Lecter is a horror icon. That's just naming just a few off the top of my head horror films from that 5-year span. If you like these In Search of Darkness films, you might have watched them on Shudder, you might have backed these yourself, and you might have these Blu-rays or DVD copies. I got the poster hanging in my living room. So this new documentary coming out is going to be more of the same. It's going to be another 4+ hours. It's going to break down those 5 years and give you a load of horror films to check out. And they're going to have their year-by-year breakdown accompanied by awesome chapters. What I wanted to bring up in this little video is how you can get involved. You can go to 90shorrordoc.com and you can read the synopsis of this new upcoming documentary. You could back the project, which is probably most important, and you can take a survey and literally have your input into what chapters get covered, what topics the filmmakers are going to talk about, potential horror people that get interviewed and become the talking heads of this project. So again, that's 90shorrordoc.com. I'm going to include a link in the description below, as long as some awesome stills that they sent us. And like I said, if you're a horror fan, these documentaries by creator VC have been so awesome. They have been, when we've talked to David Weiner, Pete and I, we call these the modern day video stores. You know, we don't get to go to the video store anymore and just look through the horror aisles. But when we have these become evergreen. You can just throw on an In Search of Darkness 1, 2, or 3, or In Search of Tomorrow if you want sci-fi, and you can just make laundry lists of every movie that is shown, and you all of a sudden have your own video store list of movies that you want to check out. You know, movies that have slipped through the cracks, foreign films, low-budget indie works, and of course the big franchise films. One of the things in the survey is, do we want to see more about the franchises? You know, Candyman comes out in 1992 and it springs off a new franchise. Early in the 1990s, you get multiple Child's Play sequels. Child's Play 2 and 3 come out in 90, and then I believe 91 or 92. They were very quick, parts 2 and 3. And the franchise would, you know, sit then until 1998 when Bride of Chucky came out. You have new entries into the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. You have new entries into the Friday the 13th series. The highly controversial Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, came out in 1993. And really started the whole train towards Freddy versus Jason, even though that wouldn't come out for another decade. So go to 90shorrordoc.com. The link will be in the description of this video. Check out, take that survey, read the synopsis, and back the project. And, you know, one of the coolest things is when I throw these on for my daughter, I get to show her, hey, look, there's Daddy's name in the credits. It makes me feel like I'm contributing to something that I genuinely love in the horror community. And yeah, 90shorrordoc.com, and we'll see you at the Lassercast very soon.